but just kind of a brief intro in terms of myself, Randy Cooper, president of CS&G, and a longtime member of SEGD, which now is called the Society for Experiential Graphic Design, and also a digital signage certified expert, or DSCE. So you'll be also hearing today from our Director of Design and Senior Project Team Leader, Jay Tokar, and he will be addressing more of the information specific to design and how it correlates and how it all fits together. Collectively, we have 75 years experience in addressing healthcare communications needs. That means I started at age 12, and Jay was really much older at the time. So anyway, the graphic in the upper right hand of the slide shows the three-pronged approach that we really feel ties into digital and bringing it into effective wayfinding, and that is that you need to basically make a plan. From us, that's a design consultation. Then you need to deal with the digital integration, how to incorporate the various digital displays, and that really is the emphasis, or the sole emphasis, of today's program. And then, of course, we also stress the integration is to be well-planned community tool, has to work with static elements as well, such as sign systems and communicative tools, printed materials, that sort of thing. All right. For years, we fought the misconception that wayfinding is a synonym for wayfinding. Now we have to add that emerging technology or apps and all this is not a magic wand, because people tend to think both misconceptions, that wayfinding is indeed another word for signs. It's not true, and that also that there can be one magic wand. Let's add an app. Here's a slide that we'll be getting a copy of, because it really is pivotal to everything that we're talking about. In this context, is content is driven and defined by the Digital Signage Experts Group and also endorsed by Digital Signage Federation, two really strong, reputable groups that have joined together and have endorsed this particular process. And it talks about not so much as a sequence from left to right or top to bottom or all relating. It's not a flow chart per se, but it talks about how hardware has to be involved. You know, we're talking about fish stories and all that sort of things, where people come to us and they say, oh, well, we need a digital display, and they start drawing figures with their hands about this big, or I've got this much space. Not dealing with readability issues, not dealing with a lot of things. Software, at the same thing. We're also seeing today what we refer to as app mania, where we've got one facility, as an example, that has an app for parking shuttles, another one for wait times, another one for maps, another one for doctor referral, and even things like, you know, how long is it going to take for the ER waits. Those are very common these days. But they've got 7 or 8 different apps, and we just find that they aren't really getting the play. They're not getting used, because I don't know that it's realistic to expect people to download 6 or 7 different apps before they come to your site. Next element is connectivity, and that's everything from putting a sneaker thumb drive into or dealing with fiber optic cables, everything in between. Content is always king. Yes, that's true, but the other elements are pretty darn important as well. So we really want to not look at any one of these 7 elements, but really try and focus on how they interact and how they apply in various systems and various things throughout there. As part of that, how is the operations? How's it all being held together? Who's updating this? Who's going to own it when it comes up for a new service plan, or who's going to update it when Windows 2010 becomes Windows 20 whatever, 2012? Same sort of problems. The design development, of course, that's really from a graphic standpoint where we get most excited, but that's dealing with the elements of the layouts, the overall visual impact. Not just what are we trying to say, but what kind of visual punch are we talking? And a lot of the things that you're going to see today are just to kind of jazz up the illustrations a little bit. So they're a little heavier handed than what you might normally be involved with. Lastly, on the chart is the business ends of it. But ultimately, without the ROI, you really don't get anything done. As a subset of that, you really need to look and measure at what we call the return on the opportunity, or ROO. And that's if you say, okay, I have a targeted opportunity of doing this, and communicating to this audience in this way, then that is the ROO. That's an opportunity per se. All right. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jay, and he's going to spend the next couple slides talking to you about some of the various applications and how it all comes together.
Well, thank you, Randy, and welcome everyone to today's presentation. I'd like to begin by reinforcing a foundational aspect that Randy mentioned of emerging technology. We all love technology, but we always caution our clients that it is not a magic wand. We also emphasize unified and targeted communications, and we warn about scope creep. We'll often hear a client ask, well, if it can do this, can it do that as well? Well, the answer is yes, but it may defeat the feasibility of the project by straining budgets and resources. So let's start with a hot topic these days, and that's digital wayfinding. But let's start at the beginning, and that's at home. Most journeys begin with a simple question, where am I going? According to an AHA survey, as well as a few others, 83% of patients do not receive adequate information at home. Now, some of the tools we rely on include maps and visitor guides, service line literature, as well as appointment letters. And in fact, we recently had a client tell us that they crossed a threshold of 1 million appointment letters being sent out. That's quite a bit. So we took a closer look at the appointment letters, and they read as one long run-on sentence. We decided to see if we could improve that. So we challenged our secretary, Crystal, to try and improve the letter, see what she could come up with. Well, Crystal has a 6-year-old little boy, so we asked her, what would she like to see? What would she need to know? And using a simple word processor, in under 5 minutes, she produced a more readable, a more effective, and a more attractive piece. Consequently, it took months of effort and top executive action to finally get past their response of, well, that's the way the software we use does it. And we finally were able to implement an updated communication tool. The same kind of mindset of, well, that's what we do, is also typical when we hear facilities say, we use one address for all of our buildings. Well, a lot of people are surprised to discover that although your group of buildings may utilize one mailing address, they may already have unique numerical identifiers that are commonly used by emergency responders and fire services. In today's age of GPS and global coordinates, having one physical address to define a group of buildings is really outdated. You can keep one unified mailing address, but consider supplementing this information with the building or entrance physical address. Now, I think it's important to understand technology's role in wayfinding. We really have to understand something we call progressive disclosure. And progressive disclosure is a technique that was developed in the computer and software communities and basically is intended to reduce clutter and confusion, improve the usability by presenting only the minimum information required for the decision point at hand. Randy often says, rarely do we hear someone say, it's a beautiful day, I think I'll go to the hospital, with maybe the only exception being labor and delivery. We recognize that we're dealing with people in a strange and very intimidating environment, and they often have physical frailties or severe illness. We know they're certainly under stress and may have limited English proficiency, or LEP. Then we complicate things even further when we use inconsistent and complex acronyms and medical jargon. And when it's all said and done, we ask them to complete satisfaction surveys to tell us how we did. So we embrace what author King Krug titled his book on website usage, Don't Make Me Think. Remember, don't give more information than is needed at that precise location or time, and progressively disclose more details along the path. And all the time, you need to be consistent and concise with the information you're presenting. So let's start by getting you to your site and your destination. Currently, Google is probably the source everyone leans on for that information. However, as campuses become more complex, Google sometimes isn't enough. Now take, for example, this project in Iowa. They have 3 different parking decks or garages, along with multiple main entrances spread out over several blocks. It's true, Google will get you to the facility, but if you pick the wrong parking area, then you're going to have a very long and unpleasant walk to your destination. So in review, let's get folks to the right street, then the preferred parking area, then the correct entrance, etc. Remember, it's that progressive disclosure thing we just talked about. And again, all this begins long before they arrive at site. Now, once inside, there's a variety of tools that you can use. Static signs, visitor guides should reinforce the digital displays and contain unified content. We had a large facility in Atlanta where Google came in and offered to provide wayfinding for them. Well, they spent several days at site. They finally gave up and left. The reason, their whole mindset is that the world is flat, and they couldn't distinguish what floor you were on. Now, there's a couple ways that we can deal with this problem. The first way, the simplest, is to use a handheld device, smartphone or tablet, that acts as your personal portable directory. It may include maps or floor plans, but does not offer step-by-step GPS-style directions. It simply acts as a portable visitor guide. The second way is to employ a customized software program that actually provides a list of common destinations as well as an animated visual guide from a predetermined starting point. Now, it's important that at this level to note that the digital wayfinding will not sense your location automatically unless it can interface with your Wi-Fi or existing location systems to provide that kind of information, you are here, that we're used to. If that isn't practical or feasible, then you can install small Bluetooth beacons. And what they do is form proximity fencing or geofencing. They communicate with each device, but remember, these will require regular battery replacements and maintenance. And one last note, as technology begins to advance, newer systems are going to rely on pushing out messages directly to your device using NFC or near-field communication. Whatever the technology you choose, you need to go back to the 7 keys Randy referred to earlier and decide how each of those keys interlaces to fit your situation. Another way digital wayfinding can often be utilized is with touchscreen kiosks or wall-mounted displays that are programmed as directories. We may all have some familiarity with seeing these in place. On this particular slide, you see some typical screen graphic functions, like hot buttons for listings or frequent destinations, and the user even has the ability to input their destination for directions. These types of units can be pre-programmed with an algorithm of specific predetermined pathways, so you have a visual guide to your destination. Some of the other expanded options allow a pinch and zoom feature as well as the ability to rotate the view. And some clients even find it helpful to include a photo or a panoramic view of the destination to help aid in sense of place or placemaking, as we call it. One of the things we happen to like about the unit's capabilities is its multilingual capability, and even offers audio options for people with low vision. Some of the systems now offer the ability to download the application directly to your device ahead of time so you can be prepared when you arrive at site. But if you haven't done that already, the app also can be sent to your mobile device by scanning a QR code that may be presented on the kiosk, requesting the app to be delivered to your phone by text message or by near-field communications. We often are asked about printers, and as long as there is someone to keep them stocked and maintained, they're a viable option. When we look at digital communications that go beyond basic wayfinding, we need to be patient and family responsive. We need to consider, what do you want to say and where do you want to say it? We like how the Barrel Institute defines the patient experience. They define it as the sum of all interactions shaped by an organization's culture that influence patient perceptions across the continuum of care. Now, they also recognize that the perception of care is important, and that's not to say that the clinical aspects aren't, but often the experience is about the people points of contact. Now, in this slide, we're going to look at a couple items that are overlooked or in the research and development mode. One of them being waiting area displays. They're about as user-friendly as you can get, but they can be more than just a tool to deal with boredom. You can try adding a block for marketing information that can be pre-programmed to interface with your existing calendar software. That way it updates on its own regularly and is constantly current. You might even consider adding a scrolling news or weather feed. We decided to include on this particular slide a couple of older monochromatic displays. They're lower in cost and highly durable. And these are a great tool for clients that have multilingual needs or areas like rotating clinic spaces. And in the center of this slide, you'll see using conventional static overhead directional signage. Presently, the digital options to replace this type of signage are very pricey, but Samsung is working on and soon to release ultra-wide monitors that are 10 to 12 inches high and 8 feet wide. And in the lower left center, we decided to include a tease illustrating where patient room signage is heading. These are small units, wall-mounted by the door. They can be hardwired or Wi-Fi updated from the nurse's station, and they can include patient information and alerts like patient prone to falls, no visitors, and similar care-related communication that's currently cumbersome. Another use for emerging tech can provide solutions for donor and recognition walls. What we see here illustrates mixing digital and static media as well as textures and combining displays with scrolling donor listings. You can see that in the upper left portion of your screen. All that information is also supported by a smaller screen of foundation information on the right-hand side of the upper graphic, and that plays a continuous loop video. All this combines to create what we call an experiential environment, while still incorporating some static displays, in this case, button-mounted graphics and simulated stone panels that recognize the founding donors. This happened to replace an existing donor wall that required expensive yearly updates and maintenance. It had limited capacity, so this was truly a great advantage for this particular client. The drawing on the lower right simply shows an alternate approach that's still in the design stage. All right, let's take another look at some other applications. Here's another use for emerging tech. The bottom graphic illustrates is an example of a major facility that installed a wall-mounted display to convey information on diet, nutrition, wellness, and the like. And just below and in front of that, you can see where the dietitians posted the paper menus daily. Well, as you can see, there's a disconnect of sorts, and you might have guessed that the IT people didn't want dietary to have access to update the digital content, and they couldn't coordinate having it put in for automatic updates. If you do consider digital for using in this type application, here's a few tips. Avoid custom photography. It can be very expensive. And there's a multitude of readily available stock photographic images and graphics that would work just fine. Also, consider mounting a monitor at the entrance as well as the counter to speed up purchasing. Studies have shown that motion does attract attention, but that motion can be subtle and still be effective. A slight shift in the graphics or images that dissolve and rotate would also prove very effective. And studies have also shown that a well-positioned monitor in portrait orientation is 20% more effective than landscape. And lastly, we also recognize the significant impact and value of digital signage as a communicative tool for exterior signage. These type of applications can be a very effective way to communicate to a significant audience to promote your brand, to promote special events, as well as specific service lines. They can be updated or changed, and all that can be done wirelessly and in real time. But one word of caution, this can get out of hand very quickly, and you can end up creating a mini Las Vegas environment unintentionally. So now I'd like to turn this back over to Randy Cooper.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. And there's certainly a lot of ground that was covered in 20-some minutes, and we appreciate and hope that that gave you some aspects and some thoughts in terms of how to better reach out to patients and to communicate with them. So let's go back to the 7 keys. It's really the foundational issue. And our approach here is not to simply add digital displays, but instead to weave them into the overall wayfinding and marketing plans and really integrate them in the entire environment that you've got. And as I mentioned, all that are signed up will get a copy of this, but I also want to send you a follow-up survey and to grade the webinar, and you can get a copy of the entire presentation if you'd like.